For millennia, revenge has been one of the most popular literary topics. After all, it is truly one of our oldest instincts. As such, early storytellers in the first true civilizations used it in their works in order to highlight a perceived duality in man and society, animalistic instinct versus reason. The Iliad, one of the oldest stories ever told, recounts Achilles' rage and struggle for revenge over the murder of his friend. Hammurabi's Code contains the famous an eye for an eye law. Revenge has played and continues to play a significant role in our lives because it appeals to and satisfies our desires for justice and fairness in the world, feelings that are an unavoidable aspect of the human condition. It's no wonder why tales about it are retold and enjoyed again and again. Even today, when the public tends to praise stories about their innovations, simple revenge plots like those of the John Wick series are still exceedingly popular. But thematically simple works, like John Wick, generally fail to offer new ideas and interpretations of our relationship with vengeance. The Last of Us Part 2, on the other hand, though at its core a seemingly typical story about hatred, love, and above all else reconciliation, explored through a revenge plot, does try to be insightful and thought-provoking. It is by no means told in a traditional manner, and the ending naturally left a bitter taste in many mouths. Ellie's decision to spare Abby completely breaks from the standard revenge story convention of actually exacting vengeance upon the antagonist. However, I believe that the ending is crucial to the delivery of the story's themes and is completely justified upon closer analysis. One way of examining the game I found to be particularly insightful in this regard was to compare it to its predecessors in the revenge genre, especially the ancient Greek works that first documented our fascination with vengeance. The innovations of the Greeks laid the foundations for the Western literary tradition. They revolutionized storytelling and created several new genres. The most important of these, in my opinion, was the Athenian play. Typically dealing with well-known mythological characters and events, Athenian playwrights were able to dramatize their stories and evoke even more emotions from them due to the performative and visual dimensions of theater. One of the most well-known and my personal favorite playwright from this era was Aeschylus. Though few of his plays survive today, the Oresteia, a trilogy of his plays, is still considered one of the greatest works of art in history, and it struck me as surprisingly similar thematically and narratively to The Last of Us Part 2. As its subject matter is relatively unknown, I believe that the Oresteia requires a bit of context to adequately summarize. Essentially, Agamemnon was the leader of the Greek armies at Troy. Before the events of the Oresteia, Agamemnon, like all of the other Greek kings, swore an oath to defend the marriage between Menelaus and Helen. This meant that he was duty-bound to sail to Troy to fight for Helen's recapture after she was abducted by Paris, the Prince of Troy. However, at Aulis, a port city where the Greek ships had assembled, the gods prevented Agamemnon and his armies from leaving, unless Agamemnon were to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia. Agamemnon reluctantly complied with the order. The Oresteia begins with a fittingly named play Agamemnon, and recounts how, 10 years after the events at Aulis, Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, naturally sought revenge for the murder of her daughter and murdered him as soon as he returned.
Clan chief slain. He lay there gasping and splurting his blood out, spraying me with dark blood dew.
In Agamemnon, Aeschylus paints Clytemnestra as a clear villain by contrasting her with her husband. While she conspires, murders, and betrays, he on the other hand is a victorious and triumphant hero to the Greeks.
Troy, you can almost see it smoking from Argos. The rubble and debris still breathe out destruction. The ashes of surfeited Asia still sighing. They raped one woman. We razed the whole city, ground it to powder, made mincemeat of Troy.
Thus, Aeschylus effectively sets up the cycle of revenge the next two plays explore. The Libation Bearers begins several years later with Orestes, the son of Agamemnon, returning from exile and murdering Clytemnestra, his own mother, on the orders of Apollo. Orestes is then haunted by the Furies, demons that punish oathbreakers, and, in the final play, the Eumenides, they chase him all the way to Athens, where Athena holds a trial for him, creating the Athenian legal system in the process that eventually frees him from the Furies. This climactic trial finally breaks the cycle of revenge and brings peace to Agamemnon's family. The parallels between the Oresteia and The Last of Us Part 2 are striking. Just as Agamemnon killed Iphigenia to keep an oath, Joel killed Abby's dad to keep an oath he made to protect Ellie. Just as Clytemnestra then seeks revenge and kills an unsuspecting Agamemnon, Abby meticulously hunted down an unsuspecting Joel and beat him to death with a golf club. Just as Orestes sought revenge on Clytemnestra, Ellie sought revenge on Abby. However, there is one clear difference between the two. The cycle of revenge and murder in the Oresteias ended with Clytemnestra dead. but The Last of Us Part 2 does not provide the player with the usually satisfying final scene of the villain's lifeless corpse. This is radically different from the endings of the traditional revenge tragedy genre. To many, this ending did not provide the catharsis and psychological relief expected from tragic art. Nevertheless, I believe that an ending in which Ellie kills Abby would paradoxically defeat the purpose of the game and contradict its own message. This is because The Last of Us Part 2 tries to break the player's desensitization to violence and make them realize the significance of taking a life. In modern American society, the most recent generations have been accustomed to death and gore. It's impossible to be up to date on current events and not see videos or hear of people being shot, stabbed, or assaulted. Blockbuster entertainment is also often centered on murder and has figured out that increasing brutality and gore without commenting on its morality is an easy way to get viewers. Violence is so prevalent in modern media that, in my opinion, many feel that it is just an unavoidable fact of life. Only truly horrific acts can incite people to react nowadays. From my own experience, this desensitization is especially common among video game players. Killing on our screens and monitors does not prepare us to witness murder ourselves, but it does prepare us to see it in our media. Some of my most cherished childhood memories came from playing the Call of Duty Modern Warfare campaigns, games in which I mowed down enemies with reckless abandon. I'm not saying playing these games scarred or traumatized me, but they certainly rendered me more apathetic to the suffering I saw in the world around me as a child. Gaming has always been the ultimate form of escapism for my generation, a time to shut out the problems of the real outside world and just have fun. When violence became the primary objective of most mainstream games, how could something we enjoy so much in our decidedly non-serious gaming bubbles be taken as seriously outside of them? At first I struggled to understand why the violence in The Last of Us Part 2 felt different to me. I mean, what's the difference between this action sequence and this one?
Jesse!
Jesus!
Watch out! Get the tires!
Don't let them get away! Hang on!
Go, go! That's two!
Damn close. You okay?
I'll be fine. Go!
Ellie! Take out the driver!
Look out!
When a nameless enemy in a typical shooter is ripped limb from limb, I generally relish the carnage, but in this game, all enemies have names, all beg for their lives, while others scream out in shock and grief. When I killed a wolf one time, I caught myself wondering what kind of person she was, what she had done before the outbreak. I caught myself wondering whether she had a family. The level of detail in the NPC design and combat certainly encourages thoughts like these. Furthermore, the clear pain and trauma Ellie, a beloved character of mine, experiences, and having to commit these acts just made it difficult to stomach. I wasn't overwhelmed emotionally by any means, but I felt uncomfortable. This game doesn't just throw extreme violence at the player like many others for entertainment or pure shock value. It makes us question if we like it too. In Greek mythology, and especially in the Oresteia, a reoccurring theme is that following the will of the gods is good, and going against it is bad, no matter what. Going up against the gods usually incurred an incredibly harsh punishment too. So, since Artemis ordered the sacrifice of Iphigenia, Agamemnon's actions were regarded as good by the greater Greek society. This cast Clytemnestra as the clear villain, since her revenge was not condoned by a god. However, Apollo sanctioned Orestes' murder of Clytemnestra. This is what ultimately drives Orestes to commit matricide as he hesitates before killing her, saying,
Enemies watching. Shame, pity, or make me shrink from killing my mother.
but his friend Pylades reminds him,
Remember Apollo! and do what you swore. Give grudge to mankind, but not to the God Clan. I remember, Apollo. Your words win this bout.
Orestes goes so far as to tell Clytemnestra that
The fate, son, she played her part. The same she-god then drives my sword through your heart.
to the Greeks, fate, the only thing that is inescapable, inevitably punished sinners. In the minds of most Greeks, including those who watched the Athenian plays, justice was determined by the gods and divine forces. On the other hand, the world of Last of Us Part 2 is one decidedly without supernatural forces. Dina only prays because it calms her. The fanatical faith of the Scars can't even save them from the WLF's attack. The game is about humans and their interactions with each other. Nevertheless, there is one thing that can judge the morality of the characters' actions: the players themselves. Unlike Greek tragedy, where objective morality is established by the presence of gods, video game players are able to respond to and interpret the stories they experience individually. This may sound rather obvious, but I feel that it is an aspect of storytelling rarely explored in blockbuster gaming. And this is why The Last of Us Part 2 wanted me to feel uncomfortable. It wanted to change my mind about the revenge I desired. And I believe that the structure of the story is what led to my mind being changed. By firmly rooting us in the familiar with the beloved relationship between Joel and Ellie at the beginning, and then suddenly and violently killing Joel, the game effectively plays to its strengths and incites the player to seek revenge. I can't speak for everyone, but I was begging for the game to let me do this. This.
Where's Makarov? Tell me and it's yours.
And this to those responsible for Joel's death, just like I had done in other games. But that conflict I felt within myself as I brutalized the WLF and Abby's friends began to chip away at my will to see their revenge through. And when I killed Mel and Owen, I was really struggling to decide whether my initial eagerness to kill them all was worth it. I'm sure many had checked out even before I had. And when the game switched to Abby's perspective, I didn't feel disgusted by my actions as Ellie, but I felt guilty. It's clear that neither Abby nor Ellie can be considered a good person anymore by most players by the time of their encounter in the movie theater, but they are still redeemable. Through their respective flashbacks, it's clear that their adolescent innocence and humanity has been lost. However, both characters redeem themselves by choosing to save other characters who, just like them, have lost their innocence but can still be redeemed. First, after Joel's death, Abby clearly becomes the villain, so when we assume control of her character, we are predisposed to hate her, just like how the Athenian audience was predisposed to hate Clytemnestra. However, unlike them, our opinion of Abby is changeable. So, by protecting and saving Yara and Lev, two corrupted yet redeemable people, and by sparing Dina and Ellie, Abby is herself redeemed. She has chosen to save redeemable lives rather than to take them. Moreover, Abby's journey to redemption is revealed in a very powerful yet overlooked way: her dreams. The second play of the Oresteia begins by describing Clytemnestra's nightmares.
Slutland's doomed demon, disguised as a dream, crashed through into Clytemnestra's calm midnight.
And squeezed from the queen's throat a throttling shriek, a cry that re-echoed through each recess and corner.
Hounded for entry to the coops that we're penned in.
The whole household heard it.
Our hair stood on end.
Then spoke a clan seer whose knowledge was nightmare.
The death of Agamemnon haunts Clytemnestra because she did not reconcile her grief over the death of Iphigenia in a healthy way. Similarly, Abby's mental state is conveyed through her nightmares. In fact, the first time she is introduced, she is waking up from a nightmare. Though a pretty clear case of foreshadowing, our first encounter with her is easily forgotten as our feelings about her become overwhelmingly negative after Joel's murder. When we assume control of her for the second time, she again wakes up from a nightmare. It is clear that she is reliving the death of her father, and therefore that the revenge she took on Joel brought no closure for her. However, when she finally opens herself up to Owen's love, in a scene that wasn't controversial at all, she then dreams of a dead Lev and Yara. From this, it is implied that by opening herself up to love, Abby has truly started on her path to redemption, and that she must save Lev and Yara to do so. And once she finally helps save Yara by getting her the medical supplies, Abby then dreams of her father smiling at her, indicating that she has moved on from the trauma the death of her father caused her. In this way, Abby fully redeems herself and restores the humanity the years of simmering hatred took from her. She learns the lesson that taking the lives of redeemable people won't fulfill her, it will only haunt her. Her newfound wisdom is almost immediately tested as she contemplates killing Dina and Ellie for the murder of her friends, but she is able to restrain her impulses. It is also interesting to compare the ways in which the trauma of losing a loved one manifests itself in the Oresteia and the game. Just like Abby, Clytemnestra is haunted specifically in her dreams, basically in her subconscious. However, Orestes and Ellie are haunted while awake, with Ellie experiencing traumatic episodes of stress and anxiety, while Orestes is literally driven insane and tortured by demons. I think that the difference between these two ways of experiencing trauma has to do with the internalization of emotions. Clytemnestra and Abby spent years, even decades, contemplating their revenge plans, to the point that vengeance became ingrained in them. On the other hand, Ellie and Orestes started to violently suffer much sooner after their respective traumatic experiences. Still, no matter how long they dealt with suffering, they still lashed out violently. This all goes to show that unreconciled hatred never goes away, it just becomes internalized. And this is what Ellie fundamentally comes to realize while drowning Abby. Even with an idyllic life with Dina and JJ, she couldn't abandon her hatred for Abby. As long as she continued to hold on to it, she would only become more entangled in it, and she could never cherish the memory of Joel, just as Abby couldn't cherish the memory of her father until she saved Lev and Yara. And this is where we finally arrive at the ending of the game. Like everyone who did a serious playthrough, I had to take the time to process and reflect on the ending. The pain in Ellie's face is palpable as she struggles to play the guitar, the last remaining physical symbol of her relationship with Joel. When she left it leaning on the window and walked away, it was difficult to feel anything other than sorrow. But in this seemingly depressing ending, there is actually a glimmer of hope. Just as Orestes escaped the furies haunting him, so too has Ellie escaped the trauma of Joel's death, though in so doing, she left behind all of her physical connections to him. If Ellie had killed Abby, what message would that have sent? Many, in fact, wanted her to do it. Are we no better than the people we were when Joel was killed? People only trying to satisfy the primal urges of revenge and retribution? Are we not able to grow, change, learn, and empathize with others? The ending answers these questions. We can. It's not easy or pleasant, but we can. No one knows if there will be a third entry in the Last of Us series, and no one knows if Ellie will be a part of it if there is one. But she has gained a fresh start, and hopefully left the demons torturing her in the past. I want to thank everyone for watching. This is my first ever video essay, so it's probably pretty unpolished and amateur. I just wanted to talk about the game in a serious way without all the toxicity. So if you guys want to see more content like this, just leave suggestions below. I'm open to anything. Planning on doing God of War next though. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed.